Psalm 2. Let's go.
This is a glorious psalm. What a text. I remember my professor said that he thought that Psalm 2 was probably the first psalm that David published whenever he was writing his songs, and that Psalm 1 was a preface written by King Solomon when he published the second version of the Psalms. This is a psalm of chief priority, and especially right here when we get down into the middle of it, this is going to come up over and over. It's the central conversation of father and son, but we'll get to that. And so we want to ask our questions about the Psalms. What's the structure? Who's talking to who? And what's the picture? Now, these questions are all going to sort of answer together, I think, in this psalm, because as we see the who's talking to whom, and as we see the picture, then we start to see the structure. But one of the things I like to do first, on kind of first pass, is see if there's words that come up again. I always like to look for the divine name, Yahweh, that comes up 3 times in this text, verse 2, verse 7, verse 11, and that gives you see the structure of it. It's going to be a chiastic structure, start, middle, finish. So we're going to work our way in, we're going to work our way out. So we're going to look for the sort of the theological highlights right here in the middle part. You see that, what text? I'm using the ESV. I think they've sort of given this 4 verses, and I think that's probably fine to see this in 4 verses. There's another word that comes up a handful of times, and it's the word king, and these are gonna be right here next to each other also. So king, and these are, you see how close these words are, King and Lord, so this threefold repetition of king as well. And this psalm really is going to be about the question, who is king? And can I remind you that that's the thing that got the martyrs in trouble, or gave them such joy to say that, look, Jesus is king. That's the basic confession of the martyrs, and that's the basic confession of this psalm. Now, it's in the who's talking to whom that we're really going to start digging into the structure of this, because there's 4 different voices, and there's 3 different conversations that are brought up in the text. There is the prophetic narrator, the one who knows what's happening both on earth and on heaven, and that's the author of the psalm. So we have the prophetic voice. That prophetic voice is here in verse 1 and 2. Why do the nations rage? The peoples plot a vain thing. The kings of the earth set themselves. The rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his Messiah, saying. And then it has the setup for the next conversation. This prophetic narrator will say, he who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. He will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury. That word wrath is going to be repeated back down here as well, somewhere. Wrath and fury and anger and wrath. And so we want to look out for that. We don't want an angry king. And then that prophetic voice comes in at the end, the last 3 verses, this call to repentance to these kings who have this great audacity up here. But in the meantime, verse 3, verse 6, and verses 7 to 9 are other voices. So the first is the voice of the kings of the earth. Here's what they say. And so we are gonna have in this psalm competing conversations. And here's what the conversation sounds like with the kings of the earth. They set themselves together, they take counsel together against the Lord and against his Messiah, his anointed, his king, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. We should recognize that as the demonic voice of the world and the flesh, which sees the Lord's commandments, for example, as enslavements, and his promises as something that need to be freed from. So that's the kind of basic plot of the kings of the earth. What does the Lord think about that conversation? Well, he laughs at it, he holds it in derision, and then he says in his wrath and terrifying them in his fury, that terror is going to come back in a little bit, but he says, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. So we have the voice we have the conversation of the kings, and then we have the conversation of the Lord. And here's where it gets spectacular. We have another voice come in at verse 7. And that verse is going to report what the Lord said to him. In other words, the Lord has set his king on his holy hill, and then that king now is telling how it happened. He's saying, yep, he did. He set me on his holy hill, and here's what he said. So we have the voice of God the Father, and now we have the voice of God the Son. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, and then it's going to tell us what the Lord said in the decree of setting him on his hill. You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the end of the earth your possessions. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So what we have now imagine the glory of this. What we have in these verses is Jesus. This is the Son, the Son King of the Lord. This is the Son King telling us what the Lord said to him. So Jesus says, I'll tell you what it sounded like when the Lord made me his king and set me on his holy hill in Zion. This is what God the Father said to me. So when we're listening to these words, you are my son, we are hearing from the perspective of the Son the words of the Father. And then this great mystery, today I have begotten you. This is the eternal begottenness of the Son. We have this today, the now, and we have this past tense, have begotten. And so we have this sort of eternal past. It's always in eternity past, the Son has been begotten. And then the Father, and this is the nature of the Father, is to give to the Son. So the Father is always speaking to the Son. When we see Jesus, for example, being baptized, coming up out of the water, we hear God the Father saying these words, you are my Son. We see when Jesus is radiant on the Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and Elijah and Peter and James and John, we hear God the Father speaking from heaven, this is my beloved Son, this is my Son. So that God the Father, the Lord, is always pointing our attention and the attention of the kings and the peoples and everything else, pointing it to the Son. Utterly amazing. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage. This should remind us of Matthew 28, where Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. The ends of the earth are your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. This is quoted in Revelation 12, the child to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So that these kings here, who are so confident in their own power, especially as they come together to stand against the Lord, that they're foolish, they're silly to the Lord, and the Lord has another idea. You want to be kings? Look, I've got a king, and I've set him on my holy hill, exalted in the cross, crowned with thorns. And this one rules with power. He is ascended. We'll get to Psalm 110, Psalm 8, even before that the Lord has exalted him, set him above every name, and so forth and so on. Now, what's the result of this? Hey, kings, you should be wise, not foolish, wise. Rulers of the earth, let's see if we can see some of the parables. So, rulers of the earth, kings, serve the Lord with fear. Not boldness, not pride, with fear, and rejoice with trembling. What color haven't we used? I want to just highlight this phrase because this is a call to repentance and a call to and I don't exactly know what this means. If you have thoughts on this, please include it in the comments, but to rejoice with trembling. So normally trembling and rejoicing do not go together unless this Son is your king. And then we have fear and love, joy and repentance all mixed up together. Kiss the Son. That's what faith looks like in a king, when you kiss the ring of the king, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. I think, by the way, that this blessing and this way are little echoes of Psalm 1. In fact, there's a little echo of Psalm 1 in the, remember how Psalm 1 talked about the sitting in the seat and standing in the way and all that? There's a little parallel of Psalm 1 here in the beginning and here in the end. Remember how Psalm began, blessed are those who don't go in the way of sinners and so forth. So lest he be angry with you and you be perish in the way and his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed, here's the blessing, are all those who take refuge in him, the Son, the Anointed, the King. Our blessing is found in him, hiding in the shadow of his wing. How fantastic. Now this verse is quoted in Acts a handful of times. You are my son. We talked about it also, the baptism of Jesus and transfiguration of Jesus, a central doctrine of the eternality of the Son of God. And here we get to see one of those beautiful glimpses into that conversation between the Father and the Son. Cool psalm, eh? I hope that these questions are helpful for you guys too as you dig into the Psalms. What's the structure? What's the picture? What's the who's talking to who? And that helps us dig into the richness of these texts. There's so much there. And God be praised, we get this little insight into how the Father thinks of the Son, how the Son rejoices in the gifts of the Father. And among those gifts, we count ourselves, that the Lord has given the nations to Jesus, and we're part of that gracious gift. Oh, God be praised. Hey, keep up the good work reading those Psalms, YouTube theologians. Remember to go to your pastor's Bible study this Sunday, and remember that your pastor is the best pastor. God be praised for that. And we'll see you soon. God's peace be with you.